Renegades of the Void of Shadows and Syndicates prologue. In the boundless reaches of space, where stars pulsed and the fabric of reality wavered under the weight of the unimaginable, two brothers navigated the cosmos aboard their patched-up vessel, the Irony's Embrace. Life in the galaxy was anything but simple, and yet for Adrian and Marcus, life was a series of close calls, grand schemes, and the relentless pursuit of the next thrill. This time, their goal was the stuff of legends, a planetary event known across star systems as the Gala of Eternal Euphoria, hosted on the lush, neon-lit world of Zytheria Prime. Now, dear reader, if you're thinking this is just another carefree romp through space, rest assured, it isn't. Not when Adrian is involved, and certainly not when the Galactic Syndicate has a bone to pick. Chapter 1: Rescue and Ruse. The perils of the Irony's Embrace. Adrian, the elder of the two, strutted through life with the unshakable confidence of someone who believed the universe revolves around him. He piloted the ship with a kind of reckless charm that made people either follow him or wish desperately to throw him out of an airlock. He dressed in a gaudy captain's coat adorned with medals he'd awarded himself for heroic acts of unparalleled genius, and his smile was the kind that made you question both his intentions and your own judgment. Marcus, younger and more grounded, was the strategist, a mechanic, and the only reason the Irony's Embrace was still in one piece. His hands were perpetually stained with grease, and he wore a scowl that spoke of exasperation and begrudging admiration for his brother's antics. Narrator note number 1. It is worth mentioning that, in the grand tapestry of the universe, it is not often the responsible sibling who ends up as the leader of a space vessel. However, the laws of physics and probability clearly overlooked Adrian and Marcus. Or perhaps the universe, in a rare fit of humor, knew exactly what it was doing. Marcus's expression could be best described as a perpetual facepalm, which, given his brother's antics, seemed only fair. Their pursuit of Zytheria Prime had not gone unnoticed. The Galactic Syndicate, a bureaucratic monolith obsessed with order, had been tracking the Irony's Embrace for months. The brothers had inadvertently crossed paths with a Syndicate convoy while smuggling forbidden artifacts, and Commander Volaris, captain of the feared destroyer the Omen, had taken a personal interest in hunting them down. The comm system buzzed to life, crackling with Commander Volaris's voice, cold, controlled, and endlessly smug. Adrian and Marcus, you have evaded capture for the last time. Surrender your vessel, and I might be convinced to show mercy. Adrian lounged in the pilot's seat, feet propped up on the console as if he was sunbathing on a luxury moon. He adjusted the golden sash across his chest and smirked. Indeed, Commander Volaris. I'd offer you tea, but I doubt you could appreciate my taste for rare interstellar blends. You're more of a lukewarm regulation soup kind of guy, aren't you? Narrator note number 2. Now, dear reader, it would be wise to remember that poking fun at someone with both a vast fleet and a volatile temper is an art best practiced with caution. But caution, as we know, was a skill Adrian would have to look up in the dictionary if he ever felt the inclination. He never did. Marcus slapped a hand to his forehead. Adrian, maybe don't provoke the guy with a destroyer pointed at us? A mechanical sigh resonated from behind them. Byte, their resident android with a penchant for existential dread, sat slumped against the navigation panel. His dull, blue eyes blinked slowly. Indeed, another death-defying escape. I'd express enthusiasm, but, alas, it's a wasted emotion. The universe is an absurd play, and we're merely the doomed protagonists. Adrian flashed a grin at Byte. That's the spirit, Byte. Always bringing a touch of theater to our otherwise mundane heroics. And by heroics, Adrian meant reckless stunts that should have killed them a dozen times over. Before they could plot their next move, Byte's sensors blipped to life, pulling his attention to a faint signal in the darkness. He straightened, an unusual glint of interest in his otherwise melancholic gaze. Captain, there's an escape pod adrift in our path. Minimal life signs. Probability of a survivor. Negligible. Probability of complicating our situation. Considerable. Adrian's eyes gleamed with intrigue. A damsel in distress? Just the sort of complication I thrive on. Or a trap, Marcus muttered, his eyes narrowing. It's likely Syndicate bait. Where's your sense of adventure, brother? Adrian fired back, adjusting his captain's coat. Byte, prepare to bring the pod aboard. With a weary sigh that only a machine could somehow convey, Byte complied, and within moments, the escape pod was reeled into the docking bay, its hatch sparking as it struggled to open. The brothers and Byte approached cautiously, ready for anything. The hatch groaned open, revealing Selene, slumped but breathing, her face pale and her breath shallow. "Hello, beautiful," Adrian murmured, taking her hand and easing her out of the pod. "Looks like the galaxy was just waiting for us to meet." Selene's eyes fluttered open, catching a blurry view of her self-proclaimed savior. "If you're my knight in shining armor, then the universe really must hate me." Adrian chuckled, unperturbed. "It's love at first insult." "Marcus, get her to the med bay. Byte, see if she's got anything valuable in her pod." Marcus rolled his eyes but carefully helped her to her feet. "Come on, let's get you looked at. And no offense, but you're looking a bit worse for wear." Selene managed a smirk, her voice still weak but carrying a trace of defiance. "Just how I feel, believe me." Within minutes, she was resting in the medbay, her vitals stabilizing under Marcus's watchful eye. Meanwhile, Byte delivered a report on her pod. No weapons, no Syndicate trackers, just a few encrypted data drives. Whatever she'd been running from was a mystery, but one that only deepened Adrian's curiosity. Once she was coherent enough to sit up, Adrian returned, leaning casually against the doorway. "So what's a lady like you doing out here, drifting alone in a pod?" Selene's gaze hardened. "I don't know what you've heard, but don't assume I need rescuing." "Oh, I never assume anything I don't already know," he replied with a grin. "But welcome aboard the irony's embrace. We're not your average rescue squad, but you're alive, and that's got to count for something." Selene looked around the medbay, catching sight of Marcus, who gave her a half-hearted nod of reassurance, and Byte, who observed her with his unblinking, existentially weary gaze. "Guess I don't have much choice," she sighed, resigning herself to whatever fate had planned. For now the ship rocked as a shot from the Omen grazed their hull, rattling loose panels and triggering alarms. Sparks flew from a console behind Marcus. He bolted into action, fingers dancing over buttons as he shouted, engaging evasive maneuvers. "Adrian, maybe actually pilot the ship." "Fine. The sacrifices I make for the common good," Adrian muttered, leaning forward as the ship's engines roared to life. The irony's embrace spun into a corkscrew, narrowly dodging a second blast that streaked past, leaving trails of blue energy in the void. He tilted his head back and shouted to the comms, "Volaris, you're going to need better aim if you want to catch the unrivaled Adrian." Spoiler alert, Volaris did not take this taunt well, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Outside, the Omen loomed closer, its sleek, obsidian hull cutting through space like a predatory blade. Smaller attack drones flanked the ship, darting around the irony's embrace and firing warning shots that rattled the ship's frame. Cassian, their three-armed, self-styled ex-prince and weapons officer, shouted over the din, "If we're going out, I want it on record that I fought gallantly and insulted Volaris's hat before we died." The narrator confirms, Volaris's hat was indeed ridiculous. Byte sighed, letting out another mechanical groan. "Indeed the dance of the damned. How poetic." Rhea burst into the cockpit, her hair frazzled and eyes wide. "What now? More Syndicate?" Adrian winked at her. "Rhea, meet Selene. Selene, meet Rhea. Let's save the introductions for after we survive. Selene, already strapped in, shot Adrian a glare. I hope you know what you're doing. I always do, Adrian replied, puffing his chest. Even when I don't. The ship lurched forward as Marcus sent it hurtling through Cytheria's neon-lit skies, weaving between the glittering spires and shimmering clouds. Volaris's destroyer unleashed a barrage of energy beams, searing the air around them. Each near miss sent a shudder through the hull, but Adrian's eyes gleamed with the thrill of the chase. To Adrian, this was just another chapter in the grand adventures of Captain Adrian. To everyone else, it was a death wish. Selene, her jaw set and eyes steely, muttered, "You're insane." Adrian threw her a dazzling smile. "Only when it counts, my dear." Rhea, fingers flying over the probability engine's controls, yelled over the din, "I can scramble the tracking signal, but it'll only buy us a few minutes." "Do it," Marcus shouted, sweat dripping from his brow as he jerked the controls left, narrowly avoiding a Syndicate fighter that zoomed past, its engines leaving a trail of shimmering plasma in its wake. The cockpit filled with the stuttering glow of malfunctioning lights, and for a heartbeat, it felt as if the irony's embrace might splinter apart under the relentless assault. Rhea's hands flew over the probability engine's console, and with a final tap, she activated the scrambling pulse. A wave of static energy radiated from the ship, scattering their signal into thousands of decoy blips across the Syndicate sensors. Commander Volaris's voice cut out mid-taunt, replaced by nothing but blessed, beautiful static. The brothers exchanged a look, their breaths heavy with adrenaline. Adrian flashed a triumphant grin at Selene, who looked equal parts relieved and exasperated. "Looks like we live to party another day," he declared with an exaggerated bow, as if they'd just finished a dance instead of narrowly escaping death. Meanwhile, somewhere on the Omen, Commander Volaris seethed, his jaw clenched as he watched his quarry slip through his fingers once again. His fingers tightened on the armrest of his command chair. "Adrian, Marcus, you can run, but you cannot hide. This isn't over." Back on the irony's embrace, the crew exhaled a collective sigh of relief. The immediate danger had passed, though the tension in the air lingered, as if they all knew their brush with death was far from the last. Selene's gaze softened just a fraction, and for the first time since Adrian had pulled her from the escape pod, there was a glimmer of something akin to gratitude behind her steely eyes. "I suppose I owe you one," she muttered, though her voice carried a tone that suggested it wouldn't be wise to dwell on it. "Just don't make me regret it." Adrian, ever the shameless rogue, flashed her a dazzling smile. "Oh, sweetheart, you'll probably regret a lot of things with us, but not this." Cassian, still catching his breath, added with a wry grin, "Well, that's one way to make an introduction. Welcome to the crew, Selene. Hope you're as good at ducking laser fire as you are at surviving space." Byte let out yet another of his mournful, mechanical sighs, his expressionless face somehow managing to convey profound exhaustion. Indeed, the endless march of chaos and questionable decisions. A thrilling prospect indeed. Rhea threw her head back, laughing as she leaned against the console, her laughter tinged with the kind of relief that only followed near disaster. "You'll fit right in, Selene. Just keep your wits about you and try not to question the captain's methods." Selene managed a faint smile, something that looked almost foreign on her guarded face. "Seems like I don't have much choice in the matter, do I?" The ship steadied as they left Cytheria Prime's orbit, the neon glow of the planet fading into the distance. The hum of the engines filled the cockpit with a steady rhythm, a reminder that, for now, they were out of reach, though not out of danger. Chapter 2. A debt of family and fury, the hum of the engines softened as the irony's embrace settled into a rare moment of peace, far from the Syndicate's immediate reach. Adrian had kicked back into his chair, his usual self-satisfied grin plastered across his face, while Marcus tinkered with a control panel that had taken one too many hits in the skirmish. Selene, still looking wary but visibly calmer, settled into the co-pilot's seat, her gaze fixed on the swirling stars outside. Adrian glanced over at her, raising an eyebrow. "So you seem a little too experienced to be just another damsel in distress. Care to enlighten us on how you ended up floating through space in a Syndicate escape pod?" Narrator note number 3. Of all the vessels drifting through the void of space, none take more liberties with the concept of safe passage than the irony's embrace. Some might even argue that Adrian's ship is a cosmic magnet for trouble, though Adrian himself would assuredly insist it's a calculated lifestyle choice. Selene's expression hardened, her jaw tightening as she considered how much to reveal. After a moment, she sighed, as if resigned to the fact that she'd have to trust this motley crew, at least for now. "My father," she began, voice low but steady, "was a mechanic. He worked for the Syndicate, though not by choice. He used to fix up their ships, keep their fleets running. But a few months ago, he disappeared. No warning, no message. Just gone." She paused, her eyes dark with worry and barely concealed anger. "I was told he'd been assigned to the Omen. You know, Volaris's personal warship. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try." Marcus looked up from his console, his face softening. "So you snuck aboard the Omen? That's incredibly reckless." Selene shot him a sharp look. "You think I don't know that? I didn't exactly have options. All I knew was that he was somewhere on that ship, and no one would tell me what happened to him. I had to find out for myself." Adrian leaned forward, interest peaked. "And did you find him?" Selene's eyes dropped, her fists clenching on her lap. "No, I spent days hiding in the vents, slipping through maintenance hatches, waiting for a glimpse of him. I searched every part of that ship I could reach, but it was as if he'd never been there at all." She looked up, her gaze fierce. "And then they found me. If I hadn't managed to reach one of their escape pods in time, well, let's just say I wouldn't be sitting here right now." Byte, who had been silently observing from his station, let out a mechanical sigh. Indeed, familial devotion, a futile yet somehow endearing trait. "So you managed to escape, only to drift in the void. And now you expect us to help you find him, I presume?" Selene straightened, her face resolute. "Yes. You don't understand. My father's the only family I have left. The Syndicate took him, and they won't give him back. I don't know what happened, but I can't just walk away. I need answers, and if he's still out there, I need to get him out." The brothers exchanged a glance. Marcus looked troubled, but Adrian's grin had returned, his eyes gleaming with a familiar thrill. "Well, I'll admit, it's not exactly a party invitation to the gala of eternal euphoria," Adrian said, scratching his chin, "but it does have a certain charm. Besides, I've been looking for a reason to put Volaris in his place." Marcus groaned. "Adrian, this is insane. We're already on the Syndicate's radar. Going back after the Omen? That's suicide." Narrator note number 4. If Marcus's warnings sound like that of a man who has previously attempted to reason with his brother, it is because he has. He has reasoned, argued, and pleaded, all with as much effect as one might expect when speaking to an asteroid barreling through the cosmos. Some things simply cannot be stopped. Selene's voice cut in, firm and unyielding. "I'm not asking for a free ride. I'll pull my weight. But if you're going to take me along, I need your help. I need to find him." Adrian, never one to shy away from a reckless endeavor, gave her a small, respectful nod. "Well then, Selene, it looks like we have ourselves a mission. Find dear old Dad, make Volaris regret ever tangling with the irony's embrace, and of course, look good while doing it." Selene's expression softened, a hint of relief breaking through her guarded exterior. "Thank you. I don't know what happened to him, but I know I'll never find out without help. If you're willing, I swear I'll do whatever it takes to help us both survive this." Marcus sighed, shaking his head as he reluctantly nodded. "If we're doing this, we're doing it smart. No charging in without a plan, Adrian." Adrian waved him off. Yes, plans. Sure. We'll improvise a great one on the way." He winked at Selene. "Stick with us, and I promise you'll find more than just answers. With any luck, you'll find a bit of revenge too." And with that, their course was set. Chapter 3. Moonlight and shadows. The battered, neon-lit moon of Tovros V loomed in the viewport, casting a sickly glow over the irony's embrace as it coasted closer. Tovros V was infamous throughout the galaxy, a pit stop for lowlifes, smugglers, and more importantly for Adrian and his crew, Syndicate operatives looking to drink away their disillusionments. "Welcome to the glamorous nightlife of Tovros 5, Adrian announced with a grin as the ship touched down, engines hissing. "The perfect spot to rub elbows with scoundrels and find a lead on our missing mechanic." Marcus eyed the run-down bars and flickering hollow signs outside with a frown. "This place looks like it's one sanitation inspection away from being condemned." Selene, however, was all business, her gaze fixed and her jaw set. She'd barely spoken since they decided to come here, her focus honed in on one thing: finding any scrap of information about her father. She couldn't afford to let doubt creep in now. Not when they might be close. Narrator note number 5. In a universe filled with infinite possibilities, there is no shortage of planets, moons, and asteroids catering to the ethically flexible. Tovros 5, however, occupies a special place in the annals of questionable decisions. Here, reputations are as fleeting as the shadows cast by flickering neon lights, and as solid as the moon's mirage of authority. Adrian slung an arm around her shoulder. "Cheer up, Selene, this is the sort of dive where information flows as easily as cheap liquor. Besides, with my charm, we'll be out of here before you know it." She shrugged him off, casting him a warning glare. "Just remember why we're here, Adrian." With Byte and Rhea bringing up the rear, the crew filed out and made their way toward the Silver Serpent, the moon's most notorious bar. It was a dimly lit, smoky den with raucous laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. The smell of questionable beverages and stale smoke hung thick in the atmosphere, and patrons packed every inch of the place, from seedy mercenaries to syndicate grunts nursing their drinks. Indeed, the unmistakable ambience of broken dreams and overpriced moonshine, Byte observed in his typically dismal tone. "How delightful!" Cassian, who had immediately taken to the place, flashed a grin. "This, my friends, is my kind of dive." They scattered to blend in, each slipping into the crowd with varying degrees of subtlety. Selene posted up at the bar, her eyes scanning the room, eavesdropping on nearby conversations in case anyone mentioned anything about Syndicate ships or her father. Meanwhile, Adrian and Marcus attempted a round of subtle inquiries at a nearby table of scruffy-looking Syndicate engineers, slipping a few coins to encourage loose tongues. "So you boys ever work on a ship called the Omen?" Adrian asked, leaning back with his best casual smile. One of the men gave him a wary look. "Why re you asking?" "Oh, just curiosity," Adrian replied smoothly. "Seems like the kind of place where an interesting fella might end up. Perhaps a mechanic named Jace." The men exchanged glances, and one of them chuckled. "Jace? Oh yeah, I remember him. Poor guy got a raw deal, that one. Selene's attention snapped to the conversation, and she moved in closer, her heart pounding. What do you mean, raw deal? Do you know what happened to him? The man took a long drink, eyeing her suspiciously before he answered. I remember Jace. Solid mechanic. But, well, Syndicate doesn't care much for fairness, does it? Someone botched a repair job, ended up costing the Syndicate big. Naturally, they needed a scapegoat, and Jace was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Selene's face hardened, but she held her voice steady. So what happened to him? The man shrugged, a dark glint in his eye. Last I heard, they packed him off to the Engulf, some Syndicate ship doing deep space runs. Guess they figured he was easier to deal with, out in the middle of nowhere. Adrian leaned in, raising an eyebrow. And where would we find this Engulf? The man laughed, but it was a harsh sound, lacking any real humor. Wouldn't know. Ships like that don't get regular docking assignments. You'd have to be Syndicate to know where it's headed next. Before Adrian could respond, a pair of Syndicate enforcers entered the bar, their sharp eyes scanning the crowd. Selene tensed, the hair on the back of her neck prickling. The man who had been talking to them froze, then slipped away into the crowd, his face pale. Time to go, Marcus muttered, nudging Adrian as the Syndicate guards spotted them and began weaving through the tables in their direction. Cassian, grinning like he was on some grand adventure, whispered, I'll handle this, and casually, accidentally, knocked over a massive sticky drink onto one of the guards, who cursed and shoved him back. The chaos was enough to distract the guards, and Cassian feigned outrage, shouting, Who are you calling clumsy, tin hat? In the ensuing chaos, the crew seized their opportunity. Byte, with his unique understanding of chaos, activated a small jammer, sending a few nearby devices sputtering in a shower of sparks. Within moments, the bar erupted into confusion as patrons yelled and scrambled, some bumping into the Syndicate guards and turning the bar into a full-scale brawl. Go! Now! Rhea shouted, grabbing Selene's arm as they ducked out the back of the Silver Serpent and darted down an alley, the distant shouts and crashes fading behind them. They navigated the twisting alleys of Tovros V, finally reaching the Irony's embrace and piling aboard in a rush. Narrator note number 6. Tovros V had never witnessed a crew quite like this one, and after their hasty departure, it's safe to say the Moon would spend many nights reminiscing over the brief but unforgettable appearance of the Irony's Embrace crew, at least until the next group of outlaws arrived. As the engines roared to life, Adrian grinned, looking around at his crew. I'd call that a successful information-gathering mission. Selene shot him a glare, though her relief was palpable. Successful? We barely got out of there in one piece. The thrill of it all, Adrian replied, shrugging. But we got what we came for, didn't we? Now we know where to look. Selene's expression softened slightly, and she nodded. The Engulf. If he's still out there, that's where I'll find him. Marcus, seated at the controls, glanced over his shoulder. Then let's set a course. Byte, check the Syndicate routes. See if you can reference any known paths where the Engulf might be passing. Byte's dull blue eyes blinked with faint enthusiasm, or as close as he ever came to it. Indeed, more digging into forbidden files. Very well. I'll patch into Syndicate traffic and see what I can find. But don't expect me to enjoy it. Rhea grinned, clasping Selene's shoulder. We'll find him, Selene. Whatever they did to him, he deserves to know someone's out there fighting for him. Selene's eyes glistened, but she held her emotions in check, nodding. Thank you, all of you. I don't know what I'd do without this crazy crew. Adrian saluted her with a wink. Well, stick with us, and you won't have to find out. With that, the Irony's Embrace powered up, engines thrumming as they set their sights on the next piece of the puzzle. The Ingolf was out there, somewhere, holding answers and, if Selene was lucky, a reunion with the only family she had left. And so, the ship soared back into the depths of space, toward the unknown, where danger, adventure, and perhaps a touch of destiny awaited. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Void. The search for the Ingolf took weeks, with Byte sifting through Syndicate records, encrypted transmissions, and unlisted trade routes. The crew of the Irony's Embrace had hopped from one Syndicate station to another, ducking patrols, charming low-ranking officers, and picking up whispers. Finally, Byte's tireless efforts bore fruit. The Ingolf was currently stationed near a small moon on the outer edge of a dead system, repairing its hyperdrive before a scheduled departure. The plan Adrian devised was, as Marcus grumbled, somewhere between suicidal and ridiculous. They'd wait until the Ingolf powered down for its repairs, then dock undetected using a short-range burst to mask their signal. From there, Selene would sneak aboard, with Adrian and Rhea to cover her, while Marcus and Byte monitored from the Irony's Embrace. As they neared the Ingolf, the massive Syndicate freighter loomed ahead, its dark hull stretching across the viewport. They watched from a safe distance, waiting for the Syndicate ship's power signatures to drop. "All right, everyone," Adrian said, a glint in his eye. "Once we're aboard, it's quiet and quick. We're ghosts. Find Selene's dad. Get out before anyone knows we were there. Marcus and Byte, you're our eyes and ears. If you see anything off, alert us immediately." Marcus gave a weary sigh, hands hovering over the ship's controls. "You're really sure about this?" "Absolutely not," Adrian replied, adjusting the collar of his captain's coat with a smirk. "But where's the fun in certainty?" Selene, silent and focused, tightened her grip on her blaster. Her father's face flashed in her mind, and the weight of the weeks of searching settled on her. She was finally close. The Irony's Embrace slid alongside the Ingolf, and with the Syndicate ship systems in low-power mode, Byte managed to hack into an auxiliary port and override the docking bay sensors. A quiet hiss filled the air as their ship's docking latch attached to the Ingolf, creating a passageway between the two vessels. "All right," Adrian whispered as the hatch door slid open. "We're on the clock. Let's move." Selene took the lead, moving with purpose, her eyes sweeping every corner as they slipped into the shadows of the Ingolf's dimly lit corridors. The ship was eerily quiet, save for the occasional hum of maintenance drones clattering through the passageways. Adrian and Rhea followed closely, keeping an eye out for any Syndicate personnel that might wander too close. Narrator note number 7. For a crew known for chaotic encounters, subtlety was not a common experience. But now, in the vast metallic belly of the Ingolf, they found themselves towing the line between stealth and sheer panic. If ever there was a moment for Adrian and his crew to reconsider their choices, this was it. But, of course, they didn't. Rhea leaned in, whispering, "If your dad's anywhere on this ship, he'd be down in the lower decks with the maintenance crews." Selene nodded, steeling herself. Her hands gripped her blaster tightly, and she moved with silent determination. They crept through the metal corridors, ducking into doorways and alcoves whenever they heard Syndicate footsteps echoing through the steel passageways. Adrian's usual swagger was subdued. Even he seemed focused, knowing they were dangerously deep in enemy territory. Suddenly, Byte's voice crackled through their earpieces. "I'm picking up a power fluctuation in the engine bay. The crew's down there dealing with repairs, but they won't be there for long. If your target is on a maintenance rotation, he'll be close." They navigated a twisting staircase down to the lower decks, where the air was thick with the smell of coolant and the low hum of the engine reverberated through the walls. Adrian paused at the base of the stairs, listening for footsteps, then gestured for them to move forward. They slipped into a dimly lit maintenance corridor, and Selene's pulse quickened. It was here, just a few steps away, that she'd finally find him. Rhea leaned over her shoulder, pointing toward a small, unmarked door. "That's the maintenance break room. If he's on shift, he might be in there." Selene hesitated for a brief moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what condition she'd find him in, or if he'd even recognize her after all this time. But she steeled herself, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open, slipping inside with Adrian and Rhea close behind. Inside, a few men and women in grimy coveralls sat around a metal table, some sipping coffee, others staring blankly into space. And there, sitting near the corner with exhaustion etched on his face, was Jace, her father. He looked thinner, older, but there was no mistaking him. "Dad!" she whispered, barely able to contain the tremor in her voice. Jace looked up, and his tired eyes widened in shock. "Selene, is that? What are you doing here?" He stood, his expression a mixture of disbelief and concern. "You can't be here. If they catch you, we're getting you out," Selene said, her voice stronger now as she held his gaze. No arguments. One of the other mechanics, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, glanced at them suspiciously, but Adrian shot him a warning look, a glint of danger in his eyes that seemed to discourage any objections. "We don't have much time," Rhea whispered urgently, glancing toward the door. "Let's go." Jace hesitated, looking back at his co-workers, then at his daughter. He nodded, grabbing a battered toolkit from the floor. "All right, lead the way." They slipped out of the maintenance room, weaving back through the corridors with Selene guiding her father along. The return route felt agonizingly slow as they ducked into shadowed alcoves to avoid passing Syndicate officers. Every creak and clang of the ship seemed amplified, each one sending Selene's heart racing. Suddenly, Byte's voice crackled through the earpieces. "You have a problem. I'm picking up increased power levels on the engulf. The crew is powering up. This ship's going live in minutes." Adrian cursed under his breath. "They're preparing to leave. If we don't get out of here before they jump, we'll be stuck on this ship with a very irritable Syndicate crew." They doubled their pace, practically running down the corridor, with Rhea keeping watch as they reached the docking hatch. The air was thick with tension as they slipped through the narrow passage connecting the two ships. As they piled onto the Irony's embrace, Marcus activated the docking release. "We're disconnected. Engines primed. Let's get out of here." Adrian pushed Jace into a seat, securing him with a safety strap, while Selene kept her hand on her father's shoulder, her relief palpable. "Hang on, Dad. We're almost out." The Irony's embrace roared to life, pulling away from the engulf as the freighter began to power up fully. They were barely clear when alarms erupted across the comms, and Byte's voice came through with an edge of urgency. "Brace yourselves. The engulf has triggered an alert. They've just sent a distress signal. Guess who's on their way?" "Let me guess," Adrian replied, his tone darkly amused. "Our dear friend, Commander Volaris?" "Correct," Byte replied, sounding somehow even more morose than usual. "We have approximately 5 minutes before the Omen arrives in pursuit." Adrian's expression hardened as he gripped the controls. "All right, then. Let's make this interesting." Marcus activated the engines, and the Irony's embrace shot forward, racing away from the engulf just as the Omen blinked into the void behind them. The sleek, obsidian ship wasted no time, immediately locking onto the Irony's embrace with its weapons systems. "Adrian," Marcus shouted, his voice tense. "They're firing up their lasers. Evasive maneuvers now." Narrator note number 8. There are certain times in life when it is prudent to question one's choices. Hurtling through an asteroid field with a Syndicate destroyer in close pursuit is one of those times. If the crew of the Irony's embrace had any qualms about their situation, however, they were drowned out by Adrian's entirely misplaced sense of thrill. The ship jolted as a warning shot streaked past, and Adrian grinned, leaning forward in the pilot's seat. "Hold on, everyone. Time to dance." He spun the Irony's embrace into a sharp roll, weaving through asteroid debris as the Syndicate destroyer followed in close pursuit. Laser blasts streaked past them, narrowly missing their hull as the ship twisted and turned, dodging the Omen's assault. Rhea clung to her console, shouting over the din, "I can reroute auxiliary power to the shields, but it won't hold if they get a direct hit." "Do it," Marcus replied, working furiously at the navigation controls. "And Byte, see if you can scramble their targeting systems. We need every second we can get." Byte let out a mechanical sigh. "Indeed, the pleasures of imminent destruction. I'll see what I can do." With Byte's interference, the Omen's targeting systems flickered, giving the Irony's embrace a precious few seconds to put distance between them. Selene, holding tight to her father, whispered urgently, "Just a little longer, Dad. We're almost free." Jace looked at her, his expression a mix of pride and disbelief. "I can't believe you did all this. For me." Selene managed a shaky smile, her voice thick with emotion. "It'll take a lot more than the Syndicate to keep me away." Adrian, still focused on the controls, called back over his shoulder, "Touching family moment, but let's save it for the victory toast, shall we?" His hands danced over the controls, pulling the ship into another sharp maneuver as a laser blast sizzled past the starboard side, leaving the smell of singed metal in the cockpit. Byte's voice crackled through the comms. "They're recalibrating their targeting systems, Captain. I estimate we have approximately 30 seconds before they're back to full accuracy." Adrian clenched his jaw, narrowing his gaze at the stars streaking by. "That's all the time we need." He slammed the controls forward, sending the Irony's embrace into a dizzying spin, weaving through a nearby asteroid field. Marcus was furiously working at his console, calculating an emergency jump. "All right, Adrian, we're lined up with a warp vector, but I need 10 more seconds to spool the drive." 10 seconds is an eternity," Rhea muttered, glancing nervously out the viewport as the Omen closed in, its dark hull practically glowing with the power of its weapons array. The Omen's comms sparked to life, and Commander Volaris's voice boomed, thick with barely restrained rage. "Adrian, I see you've brought friends. It's touching, truly. But this ends here. No more running, no more games." Adrian, unfazed, activated the comms and shot back. "Oh, Volaris, if I knew you'd miss me this much, I would have sent a postcard." He cut the transmission with a flick, grinning in defiance as the Omen lined up its cannons for a direct shot. Marcus shouted, "Warp drive at 95%. Come on, come on." Selene held tight to her father's hand, her heart pounding as the seconds ticked down. She felt every muscle in her body tense as she watched the Omen align itself, preparing for a devastating shot that would obliterate them if it connected. Rhea shouted over the alarms, "Warp drive spooled and ready." "Hang on," Adrian barked, slamming his fist down on the console to engage the jump. In an instant, the stars stretched into lines, and the Irony's embrace shot forward into the dizzying blur of hyperspace. The cockpit filled with silence, save for the steady hum of the engines, as the ship stabilized in the jump corridor, safe from the Omen's reach. The crew collectively exhaled, tension melting away as they realized they'd escaped. Adrian slumped back in his chair, letting out a low chuckle. "Now, that's what I call an exit." Epilogue. The calm between the storms as the swirling colors of hyperspace settled back into the familiar stretch of stars, the Irony's embrace eased into a quiet corner of the galaxy. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving the crew in a state of shared relief. For now they were safe. Adrian leaned back, stretching his arms over his head, his usual smug grin back in full force. "Well, team, I'd say we pulled that off spectacularly." Narrator note number 9. In Adrian's mind, any escape that involved narrowly dodging laser fire, weaving through an asteroid field, and evading a Syndicate destroyer counted as a spectacular success. The rest of the universe might have other words for it, but to each their own. Selene sat beside her father, taking in the quiet moment. After weeks of uncertainty, fear, and hope, she'd finally managed to bring him back. She glanced over at him, his face tired but alive, and felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Jace reached out, his rough hand gently gripping her shoulder. "Selene, I don't know what to say. I thought I'd never see you again." She smiled, the weight of the journey lifting. "Well, you'll have to get used to it. I don't plan on letting the Syndicate take you again." Adrian rolled his eyes, gesturing dramatically. "Ah yes. Heartfelt family moments. We have such an abundance of those, don't we?" Rhea laughed, leaning against the console. "Just admit it, Adrian. You love having a new crew member." Jace gave her a hesitant nod, still looking slightly bewildered at the crew's eccentric dynamic. "I think I might just be the one with the most sense around here." "Indeed, Mr. Jace, a sense of impending doom is practically a prerequisite for staying aboard this ship. But don't worry, you'll grow accustomed to it. Or you'll simply learn to ignore it, as the rest of us do." Marcus, watching the stars slip past the viewport, sighed in satisfaction. "For once, it's nice to not have a Syndicate fleet on our tail." Narrator note number 10. It should be noted that, in the realm of the irony's embrace, such moments of calm were few and far between. Yet they were cherished, even if everyone knew they would be disrupted again soon enough. As the ship hummed along, the crew basked in the brief lull, each allowing themselves a moment of rare tranquility. For Selene, it was the promise of a future no longer overshadowed by fear. For the rest, it was the satisfaction of a mission accomplished and a family brought back together. In the stillness, a silent understanding passed between them. Whatever the galaxy threw their way next, they would face it together, as a crew, as a family. With that, the irony's embrace drifted off into the quiet, the stars guiding them toward whatever chaotic, glorious, and undoubtedly reckless adventures lay ahead. To be continued.